Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. Verify with compliance with open meetings law notification, adopt the agenda. Can you please all stand for the flag? Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and our lone agenda item tonight is a presentation and review of school perceptions facilities needs survey. Hey, Bill.
Great.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you're in the audience, there should be handouts in the back if you didn't take those. We'll be putting those online after tonight. We'll put those out there. Reminder, tonight was a special board meeting specifically to have school perceptions review the survey for the very first time. We do have it as a topic on the November 13th, a week from tonight, board meeting to begin to look with Bray Architects what that means in terms of what the survey said. So tonight we'll be primarily focused on the survey itself, what that means, and as we start to dig into it, that will start to be November 13th. So there will be an opportunity for folks to ask questions in terms of that, but understand that some of that might be answered on the 13th. We won't have, tonight's the very first time we're looking at the survey results entirely, so there won't be a lot of answers tonight, but this will just be the beginning of many discussions to come in terms of what that looks like. So that's it. So I'll introduce Bill Foster from School Perceptions.
Well, thanks for having me tonight. Our presentation is really close to coming up. Been there for the last 20 minutes. Maybe,
A lot of pressure, Chris. Seven nothing Green Bay.
hey.
Stop.
We missed it. Spoiler alert.
They didn't do daylight savings, and so therefore in Green Bay, so that's why we're really off by an hour.
Competing against Bill.
I know, I'm feeling the stress.
No pressure.
Early today. They said, what about yesterday? They just laid it.
All right.
There we go.
If it's easier for you in the audience to turn your chairs to look, by all means, go ahead. That's easier for you.
All right, we're going to go through what the survey says. So the survey went out in October and went out, and people could take it either via paper or online. So we received 1,479 responses thus far. 524 came back via paper. This is one that came back to our office. We entered that data in. So right now we've got a response rate of 19%. Typical response rate for us is 18 to 20%. So you're right in the sweet spot. You've got plenty of data. From a statistical standpoint, the margin of error is about plus or minus 3.8% or so. So it's not, if we double the response rate, it might drop down to 2.5%. So it's not going to change at all if you get more data. You've got very, very good data. So who took the survey? We've been using this response scale, and for some reason with Whitnall you're unique, special. But for whatever reason we have 66 to 75 and then 76 and older. I always want to make sure when I look at this slide that our seniors are well represented in the data. So if I add those two together, I've got 12% and 9%, so I'm over 20%, about 21%. And that's not even counting the people who said I'm just 65. 2010 census has you around 17, 18%, so you're actually a little overrepresented when it comes to the seniors, but that's good because when it comes to voting, seniors tend to be a little bit overrepresented. In our 18 to 25-year-olds, they tend to be a little underrepresented. So we're comfortable with that. From a municipality standpoint, we had just about equal shares between Hales Corners and Greenfield residents. 12% of the sample came from Franklin, and 15% do not live in the district, which raises the question, how'd that happen? And the answer is primarily staff. We asked all staff to participate. Even if they don't live in the district, we wanted their data because we're going to be using this for master planning. And arguably, they're in the best position because they're in the classrooms and schools every day. However, when it comes to the financial support question, we're going to remove their data because they literally don't get to vote. So we've got their data, but we're going to remove their data when it comes to the funding question. So you can see 15% of the sample were staff, and 47% of the sample were parents, and then 53% were in the non-parent group. To remove any bias, we're going to create 3 mutually exclusive subgroups. So we're going to look at staff as one group, parent as one group, and non-parent, non-staff as one group, and I'll explain why that's really important in just a second. If you were a parent, we asked one question, where do your children attend? So obviously they could attend any of the Whitnall schools. We also have some that open and roll in, 9%. And by the way, that's the other place where we had all parents participate, even if they open and roll in, and they will be removed from the funding support question as well, but they can be included in the prioritization exercise. 5% private and parochial, and 0.14% homeschool, and then 3% other. So in the survey, we provided some background information. And by the way, if you just back the bus up for a second, this was a little different survey in its construction. It was really a master planning survey to do 2 things. One is to say, here's all the needs throughout all the schools, help us prioritize those, and then also to establish a tax tolerance. So we're kind of, I think of it as crossing 2 lines. What is it you'd like, and how much money would you provide, if any? And then we try to find out where the intersection of those 2 lines are. So in that context, we provided some background information around safety, security, infrastructure, and learning spaces. We then asked the question, would you support the district exploring a facilities referendum to update the schools at this time? You can see it says residents only, so we took out the non-residents. We then, to remove any bias, we created these three subgroups. The first one being the staff. Again, staff's important because if they're not on board with it, we're kind of dead in the water, but 74% of our staff said yes, 75% of our parents said yes, and then we call these people the purple people, not to be confused with the Minnesota Vikings. We're not playing them tonight, so it doesn't matter, but they're the most important group, and the reason they're the most important group is because they literally have the most votes. So when it comes to voting, if you take 100 people in Whitnall and say, tell us about yourself, one person might say I'm a staff, probably 24 would say I'm a parent, and the remaining 75 or 75% of the sample would say I neither work in the district nor have kids in the district. Those are the most important people, and they're represented by the purple, and that's why you have to put more weighting on that group. So we've got 46% of our non-parent, non-staff saying yes, explore, 33% saying no, with another 21% undecided. When it comes to actually the referendum, we know that the undecided typically splits to about 1/3 saying yes, and 2/3 probably saying no. So I would say the first question the board asks is, should we be even considering a referendum? I think the answer is yes. I think all three groups, including the non-parent, non-staff, when you look at the undecided, would probably say, yes, you should explore. However, it's probably also important to note it's not like, woo-hoo, we're really, really excited. I think they're tentatively saying, yes, go ahead and explore. So then we went to each school. We identified potential projects at each school. Hales Corners Elementary was a little more complicated because there's actually a fairly significant addition that was proposed. So we explained how that would work, the various elements that could be addressed. And then we tested those. We asked what priority would you place in each of the following. So the way this worked is we created a simple average. So if everybody would have said it's high, addressed in the first phase of any project, it would be a 3. If everybody would have said no, it's not a priority, do not address in the near future, it'd be a 1. So it can't be higher than a 3, lower than a 1. And again, to remove any bias, we created these 3 separate groups. So all the way to the far right, we've got the non-parent residents, We've got the parents and the staff, and then we did do an all, and you can kind of just see in relative order the safety and security at the main entrance and the technology, wiring, infrastructure. That tested with the most importance, and then down to the least important things were the relocating, enhancing the gym, and creating the dedicated visitor parking and relocate playground. So we did that at each school. At Edgerton, there was a series of projects tested. The cost to address everything at Edgerton was identified at $7.6 million. And again, we've got the security and technology wiring infrastructure. That piece tested high. The other one that was over 2 was update restrooms and classrooms to create ADA compliant space, and some things that were less popular were the renovating the library and relocating the playground. The middle school is actually arguably in a little better shape, so there are a few less items there. We have a potential of, I guess, 3.4 million. There are 3 items tested, and again, updating security and technology, tested relatively high. The STEM was just around 2, just above 2 for everyone, but the non-parent, non-staff, and the modifying traffic was a little less important. And then at the high school, we had $16.3 million of projects identified there that were tested. And again, a prioritized list. And by the way, I'm going to put this prioritized list into a spreadsheet for you to look at in just a second. And then we can talk a little bit how you might use this data. So that was kind of the first half of the exercise, to say what's important from a master planning standpoint, what should we consider, but it only matters if we can spend money, because we can't do this out of our operating budget. We identified $44.5 million of potential projects. We did say we realized that we can't do this all at one time, so we have to develop a master plan with a first phase. The tax tolerance that was tested was 15, 20, 25, and 30 million, and then the corresponding tax impact for the individual. So then we created this slide. Let me just get up. Can I get up? Or okay.
Yep. Yep.
So the way this works is if a person were to support 30 million annually, arguably they probably support 25. They support 25. They support 20. They support 20. They probably support 15. So we use the logic to build the charts. Starting from the left, you can see the dark blue box is how many people would, or what percent of each group would support. So the top bar, and again, these are our purple people, the most important ones. 10% of those folks said I'd support 30 million, then we added another 12% at 25 million, and then there was another 14% that said I'd support 20 million. And then we're at 15 million, another 16%. So the non-parent, non-staff, they'd say, I'd support about $15 million, that group. Parents, they're a little more excited about spending money. They said, I'd support 20 million. So we hit the 50% line is this red dotted line. So for our parents, they said, we're in for 20. And our staff, they're actually a little less supportive than the parents, but they're in for 20 as well. So when you think about, again, trying to figure out where these 2 lines cross, it certainly is less than 20, and arguably 15 is a solid number. This isn't the only thing you should use to establish your project. You also have to go back and say, what is it that people want, and can we make a logical project out of that? So there's one other item that was tested, and it was a fairly big number. This was a $7.8 million number, so we kind of set it off on its own so we could explain it better. But it was tested against the same response scale in terms of the high, medium, and low. And the question is, what priority would you place on building a new swimming pool? So again, we have the staff in red, the parents are in green, and the non-parent, non-staff, the purple people, the most important in the purple. So you can kind of see, and more people are leaning towards this being a lower priority. Not everyone. Staff is probably a little bit more high. Parents are kind of split. and the non-parent, non-staff, they're leaning towards lower. Okay? So let me hit the pause button and answer questions before we go into the next level analysis. Do you have any on? Okay.
Oh, hold on.
Oh,
I think you might have said that already, but the percent that will not support a referendum is pretty typical, right? I mean, that was my experience too, that around 20%
we'll always say no to
will
anything.
always say no. I
That's
just sort of
probably pretty typical.
wanted to, that was my experience
Yeah.
as well.
There are some exceptions to that when there's significant needs, but I think for most districts that have been keeping up with things, about 20%.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, test my Mac abilities here. All right. Since it's Packer night, I thought I'd use some Packer colors. So the question is, well, what do we do now? So what I did was I made a list, a prioritized list. So over here, these are the highest rated items, the lowest rated items. So this is actually the school in this column. So this is Hales Corners, Edgerton High School, Middle School. So there does seem to be a infrastructure project that is tested fairly high, as well as kind of this, probably a portion, not necessarily the whole thing, but a portion of the Hales Corners project would likely be supported. And these are what people are saying, yeah, I think this is important, that's what I'd likely support. And then there's another group that kind of fall into really the STEM, the hands-on learning, the STEM piece at not only the high school, at Edgerton, as well as the middle school. So there's kind of a second component of what people say we really want that we'd be willing to support that conceptually. This is just an idea, but one of the things that I've seen other districts consider kind of when they're in this sort of situation is to say there's support for a referendum, but not for a huge amount of money. So you really have to be careful, and some districts would consider two questions. So instead of bundling up one project, you could let the taxpayers decide. You could say, let's put together a project that would address green. And then maybe there is a second question that's less expensive, maybe, and let the voters decide. And the goal, which is maybe around the STEM piece. So as I looked at the data, I thought, well, that would be kind of logical. That might be something you can consider. The other way to do it, of course, is you bundle it together. You as a board would decide how far do we want to go down, and we would pick a project that we might question on the ballot. So that's kind of your two options. My green and gold analysis for the evening. And I don't think this was in the board packet
It
yet.
wasn't, no.
So I can share
Yep.
that with you. And this does go all the way down, so you can see in relative terms what's, and this is actually scored, oops, I'm not a Mac guy, so I apologize. This is scored on all respondents, so you can see the 1.6 and then all the way up. So this is in rank order, relative order, what was most important. And then the other thing that a district might do is to say, okay, if this is going to be in the first phase, what might be a logical second phase? Some districts are criticized for not having a master plan, but what works well is to say, here's our first phase, and arguably here's what we're thinking about a second phase, and maybe there's a third phase down the road after that.
Bill, can you share with us, I think Luann was sort of asking that, but just to give us some context of, you had started out a little bit in terms of, 19% is right in the middle of the average response rate. Where do you see in terms of some of the other pieces falling? If you were to compare that across, because you're the company that has the data that compares it to other districts, and as long as we have you here, how does some of our responses compare to what you would see, what you would expect, some things to watch out for, some things to say it sort of leans that way, or where does the data sort of go around?
I think typically, compared to most districts, it's pretty typical. I don't see anything that's like, ooh, this is really good, or ooh, this is really bad. Probably the first one is there's a little more hesitation in Whitnall than maybe other districts about going to referendum. I mean, there's support to go, but it's not like I'll be presenting some data next Monday night in another district, and they're at probably 70% support, saying we want you to explore, we want to go, it's time to go. You know, you're over 50, but you're not at 70, 80% support. So you're a little more tentative. I would say, as far as the projects that were selected, those are pretty typical. People understand infrastructure, they understand having to fix their roofs and their furnaces, and people get that. And I would say it's also, people believe that creating hands-on learning, the tech ed piece, the STEM piece, that's really important. I used to joke that was, you know, people saying, I don't want my 25-year-olds living in my house with me. I want them to have a job. Now I have a 21-year-old, so it's not so funny anymore. He's just there tonight. But people want that. They believe that's a role for the district and are willing to support that financially. So that STEM piece, the hands-on learning, even for those who aren't college bound, you know, the trades, you know, that's important for most school districts. So I wouldn't say you're really out of the ordinary. And I do think there is support for a referendum here, but I do think it's within some limits, and it might be, it's not as high as 20, it's maybe a little higher than 15. And again, how would you package those two things?
You know, last April, Mike, you probably know, I mean, there were very few referendums that didn't pass, and a lot that did, correct? And when you say, you know, there's many districts out there, rah-rah, at 70%, and we're at 50, I think that's really realistic, especially the feedback that we got 2 years ago. So I think that what you just said is I want to say cautionary, but something that we really need to look at and talk to people through the process.
So you say that of the 80% of the folks that didn't fill out the survey that were invited to, you figured they'll, I'm sorry, you said it was the undecided that go about 2/3, 1/3,
Right.
no versus yes. Do you think the rest of the 80% that didn't respond, do you think they will end up kind of splitting the same way when it comes to the voting booth? Is that what we see?
You really
Or do
do.
we see it fall more on the,
No, you really do. So first of all, think of it this way. When it comes to voting, even in a presidential election, which this won't be, you might have 50% of the folks turn out. So there's a group that don't know, don't care, aren't going to vote, doesn't matter, and don't take the survey. So then the question is, for those that are remaining, is this data representative of the rest of the population? The answer is yes, but not necessarily in the way that you're thinking. It's not this is where it's almost undemocratic or un-American to say this, but what happens is the people who tend to take the survey are those who have thought maybe a little more deeply or critically about it. And they're also the ones who tend to then influence the thoughts of their friends and neighbors. And they're not necessarily pro-Whitnall or against Whitnall, but they're influentials and they're thought leaders. So what tends to happen is those folks took it and then they tend to talk to other people. And they say, this is a dumb idea, this is a good idea, and then it just kind of ripples out. So it's because we've done so many of these, 15 years ago if asked, I'd say, I don't know if it's predictive, and now we've done so many, we know it's pretty predictive data.
so based on your experience with polls and that kind of stuff, did the results of the last presidential election surprise you at all?
There's a big difference between political polls. We're not a polling firm, and I don't have a political bone in my body,
Right.
and no interest to. So this is really local surveying, and I wouldn't confuse it with.
But don't get me wrong, I wasn't trying to
Yeah.
get you to take one
No.
side. I was just saying, my point is, polls can be, typically this happens, but on the other hand, there are cases where,
I think
almost unpredictably where
I think
the
that's true.
polls are way off.
Yeah, I think that's true, although I would say in the last referendum cycle, at least for our company, we had 26 projects go to referendum. The survey predicted 23 would be successful and 3 would fail, and that's exactly how it turned out.
Nice.
So
Except for those 3. That's nice.
yeah. So, You know, some districts added, you know, if you went for 25 million in Whitnall and said, I would say, I think you're going to not have success.
Did the three you thought would fail?
Did
were
fail.
Those the ones that failed?
They did.
So why are we messing around with all this stuff? Let's just go, right?
Well,
Survey says.
I think if you act within the guidance of the survey, I think you're in good shape. I think if you say, I don't want to pick out any particular project, but if there was a pet project that you said, no, we really have to have that, we're really going to go for it, and it was contrary to the survey data, if it fell towards the bottom of the list, then I would predict that you're not going to have success.
So you did the survey 2 years ago. Do you recall what that was?
Well, what happened that time was there was, and I don't remember exactly, but I remember that I think there was fairly strong support at a lower number, and something happened where things kept getting added, so there was a little bit of scope creep. So it got bigger and bigger. So what we actually tested on the survey and what actually was on the ballot, I don't think were necessarily identical.
Yeah, that was one of my thoughts were that our survey did have some very positive data last time, and it still didn't pass. So I don't think that, I'm comfortable saying this is just go to referendum. I think we have work to do to find out more. And I went back and looked at the timeline, and I just didn't see, first of all, I want to thank the people that came, because without you, we can't make this happen. And I think it's great that you're here. I would like to get more community feedback on this and find out, additionally to the survey, how do people feel about these projects? And I'm feeling like last time a little bit, because here we are, it's November, and we have to decide this by January. And will we have time to really go out and thoroughly vet anything with the community before we make that final decision? I guess that's a question I have. Last time we relied on a survey, it wasn't enough. Look at all the things we did wrong with the survey, but I would feel more comfortable if we would have time to do that. So maybe my question is more to you guys. I see our timeline includes a lot of additional board meetings, but are we going to take this out to the community? I guess we're going to talk about it next week.
Yes.
But at what point can we go out to the community before we make our final decision? I'm going to admit something. I have not toured the middle school, not with an eye on the facility. So if you're asking me to vote on a referendum, I really need to organize. I'd like us to organize a tour of some of these facilities that I haven't seen.
So a lot of this we should keep for next week. But just to be clear, this timeline has been out for some time. This is what we
I've got that.
discussed.
Right.
But so to say that we're rushed now, we planned for this to have this time built in. So it's not we're scrambling now to get it done. I want to make sure we're clear with that. So to compare it to last time it was a lot more scrambling and try to get stuff together. This has been laid out. We've had meetings with the community leading up to this. We've had the facility survey before this. Now we have this survey. So there's been a lot more that's gone into this with the timeline.
Well, help me understand the meetings with the community. I know we did community visioning around what does a Whitnall graduate want. Have we had community meetings on the facilities?
So I think I'm going to just reiterate what Bill has said, and what we continue to say is this process is very different. Last time when you gave the survey, you already had the referendum questions picked out. You knew the projects last time. So you can't compare it to last time because you could have done meetings before you took the survey so people could come in and see them because the projects were already determined. We are yet to determine the projects because we're using the community's feedback to determine the projects. So it's really hard to compare the two processes. They're very, very different. So if you look at the projects, and I think as Bill said, here's their tax tolerance, and here's where they want the priorities to be. And the board's decision on doing that, and Bray will walk us through that. I mean, that's the job that's why they have those comprehensive facility studies. Once we match those two things, that's when you bring the community in to do support for the referendum.
I would suggest we think about giving the community a chance to input those decisions before we decide what's going to referendum.
I think you did that.
Yeah, that was what the survey did.
And
I think-
only 20%
I know.
responded. So what does that tell you?
I would argue that I think, or just would like to think about, all of us to think about, having some community dialogues about this, because I feel like if we
It's a
just.
two-way street, though.
That's what we've been
It's a
doing.
two-way
Yeah,
street.
that's what we've been doing. The meetings, sorry, Kevin, the meetings that we had, even the visioning and all that, it involved more conversation than just what does a Whitnall graduate look like. So it involved these conversations, what's important to you, what makes, and that's why we geared the topics we did, and then based on Bray's information from their engineers. So we've done all that. What you're going to find, and what we typically find, is that if we hold these community sessions, it's going to be the same people that come to all of them. It's not really touching and reaching out to the people that didn't respond. So that's where it's on us to get the message out more. They may not get feedback back, but at least we can do our best to get the message out with it. It's the Whitnall window, the survey, everything we're trying to do to get the information out. Sorry, Kevin.
No, that's fine. I mean, we're asking them what they want. We've had community input through this entire process. Nothing we've been doing in this process has been just us making a decision. I mean, it's been spread out over the course of really the past 3 years since it didn't go through in 2015. It's 2.5 or whatever you want to call it. It's been community involvement the entire way, and it's sort of a reverse process of what was last time, where you had what you wanted and then you had people tour. This is us asking the community what they want, what they support. Then from there, and how much they support, it's determining, okay, well, they said they support these, maybe we should go for these and ask them that, and the question that on a referendum.
Well, then let me ask you this. Are we going to make this decision without inviting the community in to see any of these facilities?
I think we'd be having the discussion in the next upcoming meetings, what we would
Yeah.
actually be choosing, if we were to go to referendum, what we'd be choosing to go to referendum
Right.
for and what these projects are on. And from there, I would assume part of the process leading up to the referendum would be giving people the opportunity to see and showing them what we're talking about doing.
Before they vote.
Yeah.
But after we've decided. I'm just suggesting,
I'm
is there a
using that
way?
feedback
You
right
see
now.
what I'm,
Oh,
what I'm
what's
saying?
that gonna, what difference is
Let
that
me
gonna
make
make in
sure.
the process?
Yeah, let me make sure that I'm communicating it well, because I don't always. So what I'm suggesting is that, we're doing a similar process, not exactly the same. Like you said, we had a list and we went out and surveyed that
Can-
list and
can we
decided.
stop
Can I finish?
referencing back?
Yeah,
Listen,
but.
can we stop
No,
referencing
we
back and
can't.
talk
Let me
about
finish
this?
talking, please, Jonathan, let me finish. How we did it, it's important to talk about, for me to talk about this right now so that I can clarify why I think it feels too similar to the future, or the part that concerns me about how we're doing it this time. Because I'm with all of you, I'd like to see this be very successful, and we can't do it without our community. So what I'm suggesting is that there be a step before we make that final facility decision where we can get that feedback besides just, because what we did last time is we said they can always come to a board meeting and talk to us. And we did that. We always have those forums. What I'm thinking is there a way we can do a step in between before we're out there selling this as the projects that we've decided based on the survey and some input about what they want from our graduates? This is what we've decided. What I'm thinking is that just a step in between would be helpful, and it is not, and we should not rely on them coming to a board meeting. I mean, I think that's available, and we should publish that and try and get them here. I'm going to want to know more from my community than just this survey, that these are the projects that they, beyond the 20% here, that they think is important. So I don't know if we hold meetings at each
I got a
school
question,
or
if you don't
what.
mind.
Does that make sense?
Which member of the community do you think is going to come, spend 8 hours to tour every single facility that did not fill out that survey and currently is not interested in what we're doing?
I think there's some. I do. I think more are going to vote than just the 20%
Well,
that filled out
obviously
the
more
survey.
are going to vote, but I'm
Right.
saying that care that much that are going to come.
Right.
And you expect us, I guess, you're expecting us to put on tours of every single facility and the ins and outs?
I didn't
Does
say
mean-
that
but no, but-
specific, not
but
the
without,
tours.
without us narrowing it down and doing that, that's more or less what you're asking, because this whole survey we sent out was for every single school, and there's, I think, 26 line items on there, which essentially would be everybody would come and tour every single school and take diligent notes to figure out if that's what they want to do.
Well, it's a big decision, and I think that maybe if you don't do tours, that there should be a way to get more input than just relying on board meetings to come. I mean, there's chamber meetings. Is it possible that we could have had a listening session at a chamber meeting about where we're heading on this?
I guess what
Just
I
to
would,
use an example?
Yeah, and there will be as soon as once we know what it is, that's when you
Right.
go to those venues.
I know it. I
Yeah.
know what you're saying. I'm
Yeah.
suggesting that's after the fact, and we've already decided. Now, here it is.
But we've
You
used
vote.
their
Am I
input
wrong?
from those who do care on the survey.
We just decide here and then move.
They've given us their input already. That's why I don't understand why we would then
Yeah.
ask them to give their
Only-
input further by doing tours of the building and then telling us again for then us to finally make the decision.
So for myself, I would like to, with that list of those booklets that end up being calling needs. For example, the boiler system that's at its end of useful life. You know, I'd like them to show me on a tour what's wrong with it. What's wrong with our roofs? What's wrong with our plumbing? The difference between last time and this time is last time we identified what we thought we needed, and that's what we asked for. This time, we had somebody else go through and tell us basically what would bring our facilities back to like new. And then we kind of identified, but then we kind of called those needs, and then we asked for them. So of course, people are going, oh, well, geez, if your boiler is, you know, basically at the end of its life, or past its useful life expectancy, yeah, you're going to need to replace that. But there's nothing wrong with it. The plumbing is not at risk of rupturing. The wiring is not at risk of sparking off a fire. I mean, I'd like them to show me why these became needs, because my opinion is we asked a bunch of questions that we don't have a business asking. That if there's maintenance to be done on plumbing or wiring, that we should be budgeting for that out of the tax money we're already getting from the taxpayers. And I don't understand why we're looking to see how much money we can get so that we can spend it on something. Where last time I thought was maybe we didn't have as much public buy-in as we do now, but we did, I think, a better job in the sense of selecting things that, in my opinion, you do go to referendum for. Because I don't think you should go to referendum for stuff that you should be maintaining out of budget.
So 2 comments on that. One, it is your opinion, not
Yes.
speaking on behalf of the board. And 2,
Absolutely, it's my opinion.
next week, we're deciding what we do. So they gave us a list of all the needs. We narrowed that down to what we asked on here. And then when we meet next week, we're going to narrow it down further to see what we do. So the decision on a boiler or whatnot, that may not even be part of it. So
Well, that's the stuff that rated highest. So if we follow this man's advice, we'll be asking people for how many tens of millions of
No,
dollars.
that falls under the umbrella.
Yes.
But that's not the specific project we have to do, though.
Yeah, I think the next step, really, it's incumbent on the board now to think critically of, you're in the best position to know and to help set priorities. You've got what the community said, but you need to go through and challenge it all. And then you need to agree, should it be the new boiler or not? I don't know. But you can see if it is a need and that can't be paid for out of the operating budget, then you'd say, okay, that should be included. So I think that's the logical next step here, is to take this data and then build a proposed project that attempts to reflect not only what the community's priorities are, but also what you all bring, because you sit here every, two Monday nights a month.
So part of the problem was, and I pointed this out before, that these things when they were first identified were not need. By the time we got discussing them further, the words shifted to need. And, I mean, that's how we got to where we are, and they're not, from what our early data was, from what our early reports were from the engineers, before the language started shifting, they're not needs. So we're asking for folks to fix stuff that isn't broken. We may be asking folks to fix stuff
I
that isn't
think
broken.
I know you're trying to make a point,
Yep.
but I think where you're going beyond the scope of, because we're not even to that. You're suggesting that we're asking for money and then we'll spend it how we want. That's
That's not what I'm
what you
saying.
referenced before,
That's
though.
not what I'm saying.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're clear on that. That we have a list of things. The total would be $40 million, $50 million, whatever it was, right?
44 and a half plus 7.8
So
would be
40,
everything.
50 million, right? We're talking now about 15 to 20. So we're already not going with the full list, right? We're being stewards of the money allotted to us and picking the projects we think are the most important based on our experience
I understand.
and okay.
And my point is, I disagree with basically the total of how we got to here with that laundry list to pick from.
The only thing I would say, Luann, to your point is that we have the November 13th, the 27th, and the 11th and the 18th, and at any of those points, if we wanted to go and do, like, there's opportunities through all of those meetings as the board continues to have discussions from a weekly basis to go and look at a project, or that's why they're scheduled every 2 weeks. So as the discussion starts, if the board says, hey, we need more information, or I want to go and look at that, or there are 4 opportunities, and whether or not we relocate a board meeting to one of the buildings at one of, there are some opportunities that can happen, and that's why they're scheduled. And we said the first potential date is in December. There are some dates in January that it can go to. So we put those out there so the community is aware that those are all potential discussion items as we continue to hone down all of those. And they're all invited to as they become parts of those.
I hear you, Lisa.
Yeah.
We did the same thing last time. And we had a crowd at a couple of meetings, right? I mean, we did have some people come here. And if I'm remembering right, our debrief was we still didn't reach out enough to the community. If I remember right, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, we got criticism that we didn't do that.
Man, for
Afterwards,
2 months
we
straight,
did.
for 2 months straight, I was at HCE, the biggest gem, the biggest part of that whole referendum last year. I was at HCE every Wednesday for 2 months.
I'm sorry, that was
For
after.
an hour or 2 hours.
When that was after we decided.
Doesn't matter. What does it matter?
It does matter.
I-
I'm not discussing that part.
Okay, so, but we, 7 of us, represent the people. We're voted by the other.
I'm not laughing.
Okay,
What are you
okay.
talking
Sorry,
about?
go ahead.
He said something to me, go ahead.
Go
No,
ahead.
I'm good, I'm good.
I'm just not, I'm not dismissing that wasn't good, or that there were challenges there, but I'm discussing the challenges before we decided. That's where
We represent the people. We are voted in here to do this. You know why? Because here's the truth of it, the people don't want to come to these meetings. It's obvious.
know.
So we need to do the business of the people. If I don't have a problem having an open meeting at any one of those facilities. Not a
Before
problem
we
with me, or
make
having
that final
tours.
decision. That's what I would like.
Okay?
I have no problems with that.
And we can discuss it next
We
week.
could do that. That's all I'm asking for, Quinn.
Okay.
Is
But you
that
also
one
remember,
step.
we do the business of the people.
I know.
And there's no doubt that anytime any person come to these meetings, come to us personally and talk, it's not happening though.
I'm suggesting we do one step outside the normal process. Just give us a chance before we make that final resolution vote. That's what I'm thinking. What,
Let's also not forget that we had a community group that met
Absolutely.
for over a year to get information from the community. So I think we've gotten a lot of information
Me
from the
too.
community.
But in that information, they weren't looking at all these other parts of
Right.
the facilities, right?
They
were
said that we
looking-
should, because we came to the community with those ideas last time. Whereas this time, we didn't come in with a preconceived, this is what we're gonna do. And the advisory committee suggested that we not come to them with the projects, that we get feedback first, which is what we're doing. Kevin?
No, no.
You're good?
so
Anybody else?
I'll just finalize.
Hold
I mean,
on,
I'm.
let me just see if does anybody else?
I'm just one of those senior citizens who doesn't have kids in the school. And I'm feeling like I was asked a survey, which was great, and I'm one of those senior citizens that'll always fill it out. I just feel like the next step for me would be, if it came back to me, we've decided and this is what we're going to do, I think I would wonder. But if you came to me and said, now this is what we're thinking of doing, we're gonna make our final decision here in 2 weeks, I might want to come and get a little more information before, give you a little more feedback on whether or not I'd support that. I don't have kids in the system. This is your
Yeah.
largest group of people, and I am one of those people that would care. That's the group I think I'm feeling sensitive about, that I want to make sure understands what's going on in this decision before I, as a board member, make the final decision, too. I feel like I would like to know, based on this survey and the larger scope that we now have, which is great. It's great that we've got a larger scope.
We don't presenting the idea, and then it's our job to show them
Yeah.
that this is why it is, and that's where those things would come in, and that's kind of what we've been saying. Here's what the vote is, or here's what's going to be on your ballot. Let me show you why these things are important. That's where we would get involved with that.
I should have said final decision that goes
But
to the
I'm-
ballot.
But I'm just saying,
That's
we
what I
can't
meant, that
speculate on
goes
what
to the
we're
ballot.
thinking of doing, because we don't know what we're thinking
No,
of doing.
I
We have to
agree.
vote on it. So there's not a real, I guess, it doesn't make sense for us to do that, in my opinion, how the timeline would work out and the point of what we're trying to do.
All right, so I guess let's just go back to Bill's point and what we've said all along, that we've asked for the community's feedback. If we deviate from that and pick our own projects we want to do, then the information we've been given is somewhat useless. We should stick to what the sample, the 20% has responded, to decide our projects. So that's where we're going to go. Next week, with Bray, we'll dig more into those projects, those lists, see what we're comfortable with, what not, and then we'll determine what the next steps will be, how we'll do it, when we'll make the decision to go from there. But at some point, we just have to make a decision. To what everybody said, we have to make a decision. We can't keep, oh yeah, well, let's get more, we're just dragging it out. If we start putting things together and say, this is what people responded as a high priority, this is where we are. People can go online, see the presentation from tonight, and see what the high priorities are. If they don't agree with it, they can contact us. It doesn't have to come in through a meeting. They have all of our information. They can contact us and say, I don't agree with this, or I think we should look at these. Exactly. So the information is out there for them as of last week.
Did this get published somewhere?
It will tomorrow morning. We don't
It was.
typically, from a presentation.
Okay, that's what
We
I
don't
thought.
typically.
Yeah.
So it's out there as of tomorrow?
Yep, with the video, that way they can sort of simultaneously correct.
The video.
Chris
So
is
it's
recording it,
okay.
so they can hear the dialogue too. Bill, did you want to mention a little bit about the comments or what that piece of it?
So right now we're working on a common analysis. So my advice to every board always is to use the quantitative results, what we went over tonight, to set your strategy. We'll be probably finishing up in the next few days the common analysis. What we do is we read all the comments, and then we'll provide a report that says here are the prevailing themes, which are always interesting. But if you try to set strategy by reading themes, it'll drive you crazy, because you'll say this person said this and this person says this, and then this person, and they won't agree. They're interesting. That should help inform your communication strategy post-survey, and maybe a little bit of nuancing, maybe an item or two, but you can't set strategy with them. So we'll be providing that probably by the end of this week. So your next meeting you'll have that. You can look at that. So that'll be our common theme analysis.
So can I ask a few more questions? Are we not supposed to ask about what we saw in the data too? I was really concerned about the process, but I do have some questions about this. Like why is the pool so low? And is there something more we could have been asking to figure that one out? Because I wasn't surprised in this data. I wish I would have seen more support for the pool. But I wasn't surprised either. Were you? I mean, I was wondering how everyone felt. I felt like this was pretty representative of what we would see in the survey. But I did have a question about the pool being so low. Again.
I'm just the messenger.
I
Were there-
would say about the pool, you're asking about security and safety and whatever else, and all these questions for how many millions of dollars. And then at the end of the survey, it's, would you also support another $7.8 million for the pool? I don't think anybody's going to say
Okay.
yes after that. That's how I
Right.
read into them.
I agree. I think it was how it was worded, how it was supported through dialogue and through putting the thing together, because, again, it was kind of towards the end where we said, hey, where's their pool thing on here? And then you guys put something together quickly on a pool, and that's kind of where it
The
came
pool
from.
is really
So-
addressed in two areas. One is to fix up and address the immediate concerns as well as a new pool. I would say with every community, until you get your house in order, all your major issues addressed, the pool will always drop to being a lower priority. So it's not unique. And you just, that's just kind of the way it is with every community. There's very, very few communities in the state that will push that up in front of other projects. So it doesn't surprise me.
But one of the things in your data, or in the data, not your data, the data, was that we would only support renovation of the shower stalls in the locker rooms if there was a pool project was the referendum passed. If people would go walk through these facilities we have here, but we can't get them to walk through them. They're horrible. It is against, we're waiting for a bad accident to happen, not only, in many ways with the locker rooms that we have. They're horrible. But if we go by only what is said as the top priorities, when we know that not only physically something could happen, someone could fall and slip, something terribly sexually could happen, there's no doubt with these facilities, that these locker rooms that we have in the swimming pool, we are not doing our job. Just because it says we should do these because these five are the, well, we know better. No, stop. We know better. No, don't, we know better that these facilities need to be updated now.
No, and
So if we go by just saying those top five, the people will say these are what, we need to, this needs to be addressed now. And it can only be addressed through a referendum, because we can't afford it through our regular monies that we get through our budget.
And you're right, but you're right with that too, when it comes to not just the locker rooms. Right when you walk into the pool, if you ever come to our makeshift swim meet that we have, you get elderly people sitting 3 feet away on the pool deck, on wet pool deck, away from falling in and hurting themselves. And I just can't believe it hasn't happened yet.
We're waiting.
So now may I support your point, Quinn? Thanks. To what you're saying, that can easily be wrapped up in safety and security, because you addressed both right there, the safety and the security of our youth and of people on the pool deck and stuff. So, I mean, and as you said, and you said before, we have been elected to do the business for the people. So I mean, if we're gonna do something, I don't know why that doesn't rise to the top. But like you said, that's what we discussed next week.
Correct.
Yep.
But there's no doubt. And had we had more support for a pool project or whatever, we haven't made decisions yet, but that would have been taken care of in that. Maybe it should have been in the larger part of the survey. Maybe it should have been wrapped up in the safety and security.
And actually,
thing. I don't know.
when you look at the results, it's actually 10th on the list to renovate the pool, locker rooms, create
Absolutely.
dedicated pool entrance. So this is where the board has to work and come to consensus around. That
But you're
is-
missing the parentheses.
Parentheses?
Only if a new pool is
Keep
not
keep
built.
reading.
Not built.
Not built.
Not built.
Not
Not
built.
built.
Okay.
Then they would do it, yeah.
Then they would do it.
So
So
I don't
that,
know what I'm talking about.
so you could argue that's made the top 10, but again, that's the next step here, is for the board to go through and convince each other that these are, we believe, given what we know, the most pressing needs. And that's the process you have to go through next.
And to your point, Quinn, if next week we say that that pool is important, we should do tours. And then we can't get accused of making this decision without additional meetings, okay? Before we make the final. We have a couple of meetings to do that. So if after next week we say, these are the 5 that are important, I sure would like to go on a tour. And it's been a while. How have they deteriorated since I've seen them? Let's go look, and let's invite the public in and have a public forum then, you know, at some point where they can, I don't know if you do it before the board meeting or when. I'm trying to be efficient here. To your point, I think we should give them the chance. If they don't come in, but at least we did that before we made the final decision. Sorry to belabor that, but I think that's important.
Anything else? Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Oh,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I thought there was more coming.
Motion carries. Thank you.
No. Kickoff's in 5 minutes.